Okay, so on page 148 in the Maamar Zochor es asher asa lecha Amalek, and the last nekuda that the Rebbe discussed the last year that we had is this idea of difference between haskalah and hasaga. Haskalah means to intellectualize the idea, the intellectual flash. And hasaga means the comprehension of it. And the Rebbe has been really going into nuances and details in great fashion. But the last nakuda was, he responded to a rhetorical remark. And the rhetorical remark is, where does an idea come to a person? Where does it come from? Where does that idea, where does it come from? When a person couldn't figure something out, or he's just walking along or going along, and all of a sudden the idea comes to him. Where's it coming from? It has to be coming from somewhere. To say it came from God, everything comes from God. That's not an answer. What did the person do to trigger the idea? Or what did he do to make himself a platform for the idea? These are questions you have to ask yourself. And that's what he's doing in the Maamar. And Chassidus answers the question in the following way. Chassidus says that the idea comes from the faculty of ideas in the soul. Because the soul, the neshama, has a full set of faculties. And you know that this is true because, as we've discussed, and it's been written and discussed in the secular world, in the Western world, that children and people with autism of sorts, with mental limitations, come up sometimes with the greatest ideas. And where are they coming from? The answer is that the koyach of haskalah, the faculty of ideas, in the soul, in the neshama, or let's use an English word, in the personality of the person is complete. It's not damaged. It's not restricted. It's complete. And the same is true with reproduction. How is it that a person who is limited in their mental abilities or in other faculties, in other personality issues, can reproduce and can reproduce a healthy child, etc., etc.? How is that possible? The answer is because in the neshama, or in the person, the koyach hasn't been damaged, hasn't been hurt, hasn't been ruined. What is limited and restricted is the manifestation, right? The manifestation. Do I see? Do I hear? Do I talk? Do I understand? Those, yeah, there are every person in the way that Hashem created them. Whether we understand or we don't, and we don't. If someone thinks they understand, they should go check themselves out somewhere. We don't know why Hashem makes one person this way and another person that way. That's what Hashem chooses. But that does not take away at all from anything that the person can accomplish. And I've told you that in Beis Rivka, years ago, I had, Baruch Hashem, 6 girls, and they all went to Beis Rivka in Crown Heights. There was a girl, a shliach's daughter from a Chabad home, who would crawl on the floor because God didn't bless her with feet. And she's an A student. And it didn't stop her. And there are numerous such stories everyone knows. Why? Because the koyach and the nefesh is shalem. And if you identify with the koyach of the nefesh, that shalem, you can do anything. Bringing back this, and this is a very important nekuda to really understand. For a moment, I point to a talk that Rebbe gave in the summer of 1976. I heard it in the Catskills in Camp Gan Yisrael in Parksville, New York, next to Liberty. The flagship Gan Yisrael before all the other Gan Yisraels, you know? The one that Rebbe visited 3 times in 56, I think 57, and 1960. So, the Rebbe said then, this was after the 1974, the Mechelmas Yom Kippurim, the Yom Kippur War of 73. And, there were casualties, there was those invalids, and people were confined to wheelchairs, Rahman Litzlan L'Hoyoloisia, ever again. And they came to tour New York, the Big Apple. Well, one of the places you come is 770. 770 is on the map. And the Rebbe and Lubavitch. So they came, and they cleared all the benches downstairs in 770 in the first part of the shul. And they set up a beam and a platform for the Rebbe, and they had all the soldiers come in, and they were called at the time Nechei Yisrael, the invalids of Israel. They were invalids because of the war. And the Rebbe spoke to them in Lashon HaKodesh, not in modern Hebrew, because, simply speaking, that's not the language that he spoke. The Satmar will want to tell you he didn't speak that way because it's Osir al Pidin. But he spoke, like that. And it's online, I think. You can hear it. It's very interesting to hear how the Rebbe speaks Lashon HaKodesh to Israelis. It's a little funny, but with the entire seriousness and the entire focus. Then the Rebbe said that he wants to shake everyone's hand. And he got up from his place and he went around shaking everyone's hand. And it was a once in a lifetime sight, because we never saw such a thing, and it was so interesting. Now, an outsider would say, what's the big deal? Here's a rabbi, he's saying hello, he's greeting everyone. But that's an outsider. If you knew the way the system went, the Rebbe didn't shake hands, and Hasidim didn't shake hands, and the whole system going down from his place to people out of Farbrengen. Did the Rebbe come along shaking people's hands? No. He sat in his chair, he spoke, we listened, we sang L'chaim, and we went home. And here, no. This happened in 1976. And the Nakuda of what the Rebbe said to them is that you aren't damaged goods. That was the Rebbe's message. You're not Nechei Yisrael. You are Mitzuyanei Yisrael. You are from the excellent Israelis. You are the choicest, best. Now you would think the Rebbe said that to make them feel good, right? He said it because that's the emes, and he brought a Maamar from the Tzemach Tzedek, and he brought Kabbalah, and he brought Gemara, and he explained it. And basically, the Tzemach Tzedek has a Maamar in Derech Mitzvah Secha that's a must learn. It's the mitzvah of that a Baal Mum is not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash. It's one of the mitzvahs in Derech Mitzvah Secha, and the Tzemach Tzedek explains based on Kabbalah and that someone who is hurt, who comes out as a Baal Mum, has a higher source, has a higher neshama. So the Rebbe was saying to them, the fact that now you're invalids, it's not because you're damaged and you're low, it's because you're higher. Unbelievable. That was during the week when he spoke to them with a microphone. Then Shabbos, or the next Shabbos, the Rebbe explained why. I think it was the next Shabbos why he went down to shake everyone's hand. And he said that according to the Arizal and Kabbalah, there's a name called Yud Lamed Yud. It's the same name that that to bring up the bones of Yosef after they were in Mitzrayim on the way out, we needed to bring up the coffin and take him out of Mitzrayim. So it says in Kabbalah that they used Hashem, which equals Yud Lamed Yud. And the Rebbe said that when two Yidden give their hand, Yad is 14. Yad and Yad is 14, twice times 14 is Koyach. It's 28. And that creates somehow the Yud Lamed Yud, because Yud Lamed Yud is 30, 50. I forget now how exactly the gematria works out. And so he wanted to shake hands to bring the Aliyah to the Mitzvah Israel. Like, could you imagine? You find me another rabbi, another Rosh Hashiva, another Rebbe who says, I want to shake their hands because I want to create an Aliyah in them. First of all, who would have even the audacity to say that? And again, the Rebbe, he said it with the greatest humility. But if you put two and two together, it's from another world. And this is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This is what we're talking about. So why am I saying that to you? Because we're talking about the koyach, we're talking about that although outwardly you're sitting in a wheelchair, and outwardly you were hurt in a war, and outwardly they call you Nechei Yisrael, comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, that's the Chitzonius. The Panemius is, you have the most special people in front of you. And they're greater. So how do you reconcile that? And the answer is, this is what I'm getting at, and so we'll see how it's relevant here to the Maamar, that the koyach hanefesh, or in plural, yoini, koychos hanefesh, the faculties of the soul are complete. God does not give a person a set of faculties that are damaged. That's an oxymoron. It's a contradiction to who God is. God is mushlam, right? God is complete and perfect. So he creates perfection and completion in the world. Where does incompletion and imperfection begin? With the manifestation. So of course, we acknowledge that a baby could be born a certain way, and sometimes there are issues. Absolutely. But that's not in the nefesh. It's a very, very important nakuda. So what I'm pointing at is that Maamar of Tzemach Tzedek and this Farbrengen of the Rebbe. If you really, and I always say, for people, we're always around people who, who experienced some of these outward difficulties. It's a chayv to learn the sicha. Number one, it'll give them real hope. Number two, it'll show the emes, and it's like a must learn, especially in Eretz Yisrael, where you have, people have been injured in war and all kinds of things. This is a chayv kodesh to really make like a shear in this. Maybe you get Rabbi Pharaoh or someone to teach this sicha in depth, because I think it would enrich in so many different lives. But so let's go back to what we're learning here. The Rebbe says, the previous Rebbe says, that where does an idea come from what's called the koyach hamaskil, the faculty of intellectualism, of intellect in the soul. And the koyach hamaskil is complete. So his rhetorical question is, you're telling me that the most pure part of Chokhmah doesn't receive from anything. It does. It receives the power of Koyach HaMaskil. That's his question. So why do you tell me that only Hasaga, comprehension, is a Mekabel, even Haskol, even the part of Chokhmah that's Yonason, Haskalah, intellectualism, also receives the Koyach HaMaskil. That's his rhetorical question. It's a good question. What's his answer? His answer is, when we talk about receiving, we mean receiving in an individual way, in a pratisdika way, in a specific way. And that it doesn't do. In other words, Avram, there is the power of intellect in the soul that's complete as a general idea. But if you're looking for specific, I'm intellectualizing in science, I'm intellectualizing in Torah, I'm intellectualizing in art, I'm intellectualizing in piano. No, you don't have that there. You hear that? So in the Koyach HaMaskil, there is no divisions and partitions and departments of A, B, C, D. It's what he calls in the Maamar a koyach klali, a general koyach, a general faculty. So yes, as far as the chokhmah receiving from the koyach klali, it does. But the Rebbe says, here we're not talking about that. We're talking about chokhmah receiving in a pratisdika way, in a specific individual way. That it doesn't get from koyach hamaskil. Where does that begin? One second. Make sure finish my thought. Where does that begin? In hasaga, in comprehension. The compartment in the brain that's known as hasaga within Chachma, we're talking about within Chachma, that's the area which starts compartmentalizing art, math, science, piano, etc. Yes, Moshe.
Rabbi Dalton, just a quick question. When you say koach hamaskil, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. In Lashon, let's say in the modern pronunciation, one could say koach hamatchil.
No.
Like the koach, the initial koach.
No.
Maskil, as in like maskilim, so to speak.
It's seichel. Maskil, seichel.
Yeah.
Right.
Seichel. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, now let's look inside, page 148, and see this inside. We're like in smack middle of the page. V'im hayois. I want to go back. It's like 13, 11, 12, 13 lines. The first word on the line is v'im hayois. V'im hayois. And although the nekuda is haskola, that the nekuda, the point of intellectualism, bo mikoyach hamaskil, comes from the faculty of seichel. So this is a rhetorical remark, question. Here comes his retort. He refutes his own question. Hine zeu ma shekoyach hamaskil hu mokar seichel. This is only true regarding the koyach of maskil, the faculty of haskola, as a makor, an overall source. Veloi shahaskola mikabel mikoyach hamaskil, but not that the idea receives from the koyach hamaskil, because we're talking about a particular idea. If your idea is about rentals, your work, housing, tourists, what does that have to do with the intellectual power of mathematics and sciences? Nothing. That's what he's saying. Haskell over here means the particular area in which your idea is about. That does not receive, the specific issue does not receive from the koyach hamaskil. Ki'im, let's continue inside, shenim sheches mibirkoira. It flows from the source. Avram. In other words, all ideas, any and all idea, if you didn't have a source for it in the soul, you wouldn't have an idea. You couldn't have an idea. That's what I told you I began this year. Why not? Where did it come from? It fell down from heaven? Where did it come from? Well, you ask a person, he'll tell you, from God. It's ridiculous. When we forgot, everything comes from God. Thank you very much. Give me a systematic answer to the question where I'm walking and playing and sleeping and all of a sudden an idea comes to me. Where did it come from? The answer is from the Koyach HaMaskil. But not my individual idea, because I have an ongoing, healthy, complete, perfected Koyach HaMaskil. It's open for business. What's the business? Ideas. All ideas. Now, when your comprehension component kicks in, you take that and you use it in your specific idea, in your specific area. And that's what he says, Kiyim sheches mim koira. What does nimsheches means? It flows from the source. So there is a makar. That's my point. There is a source, Koyach HaMaskil. And because there's a source, therefore the source says you have an opening for ideas. What particular idea? You got to talk to your part of that brain, which is hasaga. But as far as a place that allows itself to come up with ideas, bichlal, you have it. Let's go further. The tchila, and he explains, look how he says. The tchila, initially, loihaya metzias haskola. There was no existence of haskola, of ideas. The koyach hamaskil, koyach seyach kloli. Why not? Because koyach hamaskil is a general koyach. It's not math, it's not rentals, it's not art, it's not Torah, it's not science. What is it? A general koyach. Ideas. The kan, and over here, you asked me about this yesterday. The kan meaning in seichel, in chokhmah, hu shenes chadish. Look at the word there, very important word. Here, mitzios haseichel. It's very important, these words. Here, the existence, the mitziut of seichel becomes mitchadesh. It becomes created. In other words, before here, you didn't have a metziut of seichel. You had an overall idea of seichel, the world of seichel. But the tangibility of seichel happens now. So we have three stages. Listen to this, chevra. Koyach hamaskil, the seichel within chokhmah, and the which we call haskola, and the hasoga within chokhmah, which we call hasoga, in this context. And the difference is that in koyach hamaskil it's a koyach klali, or as he says in other words, it's the makor, the source. In the haskola it becomes mitziut haseichel, and in hasaga it becomes your particular area. Abel hasaga, but now he says, but compared to hasaga, mikabel mahaskala. Oh, here, when you start comprehending the idea in the particular area in which you're using your idea, here you become a recipient from the step before, from the haskola. V'chol mikabel, listen to this rule, and every single recipient, hare'ein lo yadayin etzem adover, doesn't have the essential thing, ve'eina misatzet imay, and doesn't bond and become one with the thing. The kasher mikabel v'lokeach haso etzem, because when someone receives and takes the essence, hareo etzem nitvus etzloi, ve'eina madreges mikabel oid. Wow. We have a stage called mashpia and a stage called makabel, giving and receiving. He says a receiver When you're in the mode of receiving, you don't yet have the essence, because you're only receiving. You're receiving. So you're taking in, but it's only after you've taken it in already and it becomes one with you, so then you're no longer a makabel, then you're also a mashpia. I want you to look at the next mashal to see if it becomes clearer. Uvarav Talmud. Let's see this by a teacher and a student. In the calls Marsha Talbot as long as the idea that the teacher taught the student has not yet become one. The student has not internalized the idea, that's the word, so the idea is not yet one with the student. The student on his own doesn't know it clearly. Only when a teacher teaches him and guides him and he can understand it. But if he's on his own, he still does not understand it clearly. This student cannot distance himself from the teacher as far as learning. He still needs his teacher. And if he does distance himself, guess what happens? The idea that his teacher taught him will be forgotten by the student because it hasn't become part of his DNA. And also, if he's not with the teacher, and he's still a student, mekabel stiros v'halamos. He is a vessel for contradictions, for forgetting things. How do you forget? How do people refute ideas? You go to a shir. Rashi and Gemara and Tosfos and Rambam and Halacha and Chassidus. You understand, then you come home or you go to base medrash and someone comes over and starts talking to you and asks you a few questions, you don't have what to answer. You don't understand. What happened? The answer is, and guess what? The same person throwing those questions to your teacher would be able to answer them and everything would be clear. So why can't you do it? The answer is because you, in your own right, doesn't know it yet. You really don't understand it. And by the way, this is much of learning. Much of learning is we repeat what we hear from others, from teachers, great teachers, and everything else. But on our own, we haven't figured out that we understand it. And if we understand it ourselves, not because the teacher taught it to us, then we'll be able to come up with the same answers that the teacher would answer the person who's asking the questions. And the only reason I'm not able to is why? Because I'm only a makabel. That's his point. I think it's a great point, a great mashal. That a makabel, Yoni, it's a gewaltige Sache to be makabel. It's a great thing to receive and be makabel. But it's not, you don't own it. You don't own it. The other person owns it. You just receive. And if the other person owns it, you didn't get all of it. You only got part of it. When you take it in and you internalize it and it becomes you, then you own it. You're no longer a makabel. You're a mashpia at that time. Let's go further inside just a minute. And when the idea is internalized with his DNA, that he himself knows the idea and the truth of the idea, then he can say, bye-bye, teacher. And if you saw the way Rabbi Soloveitchik taught at Yeshiva University, this is the way he taught. And he hoped that his students, in other words, a good teacher is not looking to just impart information. I mean, we learned this, by the way, in the Kuntres HaChinuch V'Hadracha for the previous Rebbe. Remember, Moshe? That ultimately a good teacher wants to create that the student should be a teacher. Not that the student should be a makabel. That's step one, and boy, is that a big step. That's why I say always to you, Chevra, when a teacher's teaching, you're not supposed to be in the mode of, I have a question. That's the beginning of not understanding. Just sit back and listen. Listen and take it in. Then the next step is to reflect on what you remember. And then the next step is to see if you understand it, and you probably don't on your own understand it well, then you discuss it with a teacher. That's healthy teaching and healthy receiving. In other words, Avram, you have to first be a makabel to be able to be a mashpia. And most of us have an issue with that. We want to be a mashpia right away, right? I want to tell you what to do. Everyone wants to tell the other person what to do. Before you can tell someone what to do, you have to be a makabel. I think we'll stop here, but that's a great lesson to walk away with for Shabbos. It's Shabbos Mevorchim Chodesh Adar, right? It's Shabbos Mevorchim Chodesh Adar. So, every experience, Purim's coming, it's one day, 24 hours, but it's such a special holy day. And here we are with all of this world chaos. A person is a makabel and gets themselves out of the way. See, there's two things. One is I have humility. And then the other thing is, even if you have humility, just get out of the way. Don't be a blockage. Don't be a blockage. Hasidim would always say like this. It's a good line. It's a good line like this. The Rebbe wird durchführen. The Rebbe will carry out what he needs to do for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Aber sei nicht, don't be a deterrent. Don't get in the way. Just get out of the way. Or just follow the script and don't put up, in Yiddish there's a word, I don't know if you, stell nicht kein Fieslach. It's a very beautiful Yiddish expression. Stell nicht kein Fieslach. 4 words. Stell means to put, nicht not. Fieslach, fies is a foot. Stell nicht kein Fieslach. Don't stick your leg out and make someone else trip. So there is, don't stick your foot out and make someone else trip, and then there is, keep your foot in. Just get out of the way. Let it flow. I think this is it. Today we have to, people comes over to me, shul, Lubavitcher, give me a bracha. I didn't want to say it because it was a shul. And the bracha is, get out of the way, let God run the world. I have to make a stock move today, and it's going to make or lose, and money, this, that. Hey, guy, you run the world, the Eibishter runs the world. You study, then you spend time in the markets, and knows, and it's this, and it's inward the curve, and he knows the charts, and all the good mices. Get out of the way. And if you get out of the way, the Eibishter's bracha will flow. So we're learning here about Mashpia, Makabel, we're learning it on a very intellectual level. It needs to be brought down in our world that we need to make room for God. Okay? You don't make room for God, then it's all your own ego, and, sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose. Have a great Shabbos, everyone. We'll see everyone Monday, Mitzvah Shem. Good learning. Take care. Bye-bye. Shabbos. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.